Lake County, California is a quiet, rural countryside secluded in the mountains between the Pacific coast and the wide, flat expanse of the Sacramento Valley. It's an ideal environment for flying light aircraft, with scenic vistas, open farmland, the largest natural lake in California, and endless bright blue skies for 9 months out of the year. The area has some of the cleanest air in the United States, and from altitude you can see from San Francisco and the Pacific Ocean to the brilliant snow-capped Sierra Nevada mountains. It's truly an ideal place to own and fly an airplane. The flying hub of Lake County is Lamson Field, which could be the poster child for thousands of similar enclaves of civil aviation that have nurtured the growth of flying in the United States for over a century. As such, it's a non-towered airport and home to a friendly and tight-knit group of flyers and FBOs, with a lighted 2,500-foot paved runway and instrument approach. Here, you'll find all types of aircraft, from seaplanes to gliders and a helicopter medevac, and of course, a community of airplane owners and friends and their hangars. One of these hangars is the second home of Lee Beery, a retired United Airlines technical supervisor, private pilot, and licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Here, he maintains his aircraft and holds court with many of his friends from around the airport. At over 80 years old, Lee is a member of the UFOs, or United Flying Octogenarians, and has been flying since 1955 with, at last count, 2,500 plus hours in the air, during which time he has been the owner of a series of mostly aerobatic aircraft, the latest of which is his prized Corby Starlet. The Starlet is one of the types of aircraft that are ideal for the increasingly popular sport license held by many senior pilots. Now let's let Lee tell you about his airplane and himself in his own words.
Thanks to my good friend and neighbor, Gene Lambert, you're going to get a look at a Corby Starlet. There's only about 4 of them flying in the United States. It's an Australian design, great number of them over in Australia and New Zealand. It's a John Corby design in the late 60s. It's all wood and fabric. In Australia, they use primarily the Jabiru engine. In this country, we use mostly the Great Plains or the Revmaster. I just stumbled on this airplane. A really good friend of mine introduced me to sporty aviation. I have been flying certified aircraft since the middle 50s. So I have about 60-some years of flying. Primarily, I've owned Piper aircraft with a tail wheel, and I got into aerobatics in the 70s when I purchased a couple of Baby Great Lakes, which were really fun airplanes. And when I discovered, like I said, my good friend Eric told me about this Corby. It was available on Barnstormers, and I made a contact and found out that this would really be a neat airplane for the sport plane or the sport license pilot. I'd had a little bout with cancer and was concerned about keeping my third-class medical active, and decided that if I went sport plane now, I wouldn't have to worry about the license, the medical. So we started investigating the purchase of this, and we made it and got it back to California about 1.5 years ago, and I've really enjoyed this airplane. I've owned a mess of airplanes, but this one has been a lot of fun. There's only about 4 of them flying in the United States. It's an Australian design, great number of them over in Australia and New Zealand. It's a John Corby design in the late 60s. It's all wood and fabric. In Australia, they use primarily the Jabiru engine. In this country, we use mostly the Great Plains or the Revmaster. Let me take you a little tour around the airplane and show you what's kind of unique about it. It's got a lot of tail area and a lot of control surfaces. You can walk it straight up with this rudder. It's enormous compared to the rest of the little airplane. About 40 pounds of tail weight. Just pick it up, go anywhere you want with it. It's got a steerable tail wheel, which is good. The tapered wing, it's a 43013C airfoil. All this tells you is that it's a very unique airfoil because it gets really good lift part of the fact is that the whole tail assembly on the airplane is also a flying surface. It has created lift too. It's not just a flat piece of material. And this one is kind of unique because it has wing tanks. It's the only Corby Starlet that I know that has wing tanks. There's 4 gallons in each wing. It's transferred to the center tank, which is 18 gallons total, with a 10 gallon in the main tank. So you've got about 3 to 4 hours of flight time. The airplane, we figured 120 knots or 110 on a trip. So you've got almost a 500-mile range. And this is powered by a, excuse me, a RevMaster. They call it 2180. It's about 2200 cc's now with the modifications that's been done to it. And the fuel burn, as I said, right around 4 gallons an hour. If you get to altitude and you lean it way back, you can actually get it slightly under 4 gallons an hour. Wooden propeller, of course. It's 46 pitch. It's been reduced a little bit to get the RPMs up on the engine. So RevMaster likes the engine to turn around 3,000 RPM or a little bit more. This actually adds horsepower to the engine. If you notice that when the prop is down here, there's only about 1/8 of an inch clearance. When you pull the controls in the cockpit to go ram air, this adds about 50 RPM to the engine. So you're ramming the air in there when you operate the ram control. The rest of the engine is pretty standard RevMaster engine. It has dual magnetos rather than an electronic ignition system. That's probably old-fashioned, but it works good. It does not have an inverted system. That would be nice if it was inverted. The Baby Great Lakes I had an inverted system, and my goal was to fly across the lake upside down, but I never made it. You just keep oozing out of the airplane. But this airplane doesn't have an inverted system, so what aerobatics I do in this has to be pretty mild and positive G's. One of the main goals with this airplane was to reduce weight and to modernize it a little bit, because this was built in 98. It would have had an old wood panel with a lot of automotive type instruments in it. It was just as many things you could get in there. It was clear full. So this firm that helped me with the ram air also helped me build this carbon fiber instrument panel. And we've modernized it with electronic tack, cylinder head temp, EGT, G-meter, volts, you name it. And then fortunately I have another good buddy of mine that helped me install this radio. It's another high-tech radio. There's the only controls I have in there to operate during flight is the fuel transfer. Everything else is pretty much standard. You have a ram air for the ram, you have mixture control, throttle, has toe brakes. There's also an extra radio there, a little handheld that's just nice to have an extra radio in case you need it. The electrical system is adequate for a small radio, but I don't have a transponder or encoder. And here comes one of my neighbors right now. This is he's a flight instructor, and he just got through giving me my biannual. Like I mentioned, I just turned 84, and he gave me my last biannual single place airplane, and the FARs allow you to do this, so we just did the air work over the airport, and then he says, okay, I'm going to turn you loose, go ahead and do some aerobatics for us. So I put on a mini air show here for the airport crowd. It was fun. Okay, that's probably about it. I said I probably bored you enough with a lot of detail you're not interested in, but let's just take it out now and do a little flying, give you a little view of the lake, whether it's upside down or right side up, doesn't matter much for me. So light the fires, kick the tires, here we go. So my home here is Lampson Field, Northern California, small area, non-tower area. You might be interested in knowing I had my first airplane was a Cessna 140, which I made out of 3 wrecks. I made 1 airplane out of it. I sold an article about how I did that to a magazine, got enough money for my flying lessons, and then I went out and I bought my first Piper Vagabond, and then I sold that and bought a second Piper Vagabond. I ended up with 3 of them, and then I bought a Piper Clipper, which is another unique airplane. I only made that for 1 year, 1949. And then I got into aerobatics, and I bought 2 Baby Great Lakes, which was a lot of fun. And this machine's pretty neat for takeoff. It took a lot of getting used to for me because the engine turns counter direction to all the other airplanes I've owned. In the Corby here, like I said, instead of taking right rudder, you need left rudder. And once you're lined up on the center line, it's not too difficult. Just keep the tail wheel down until you got some good speed up, and then pop the tail off and climb out at about 90 knots. And in this airplane, with today's engine's been pumped up a little bit from the 65 horse that it's supposed to be. We climb out at about 90, 95 knots, and we're going to get about 1,200 foot per minute climb, depending on the weather. And we'll climb out, it'll be turning about 2,900 RPM until we get up to our cruising altitude. Then the airspeed will build, and so does the RPMs. The airplane is trim for my weight. I'm the only guy that flies it, so there's no real trim to do. It does have electric trim, and once we've established our trim speed, our cruise speed, then we can play around and do some air work. Fun airplane to fly because it's very sensitive to the controls. It'll just turn on a dime. It loves to do rolls. That's about it. It's just a fun plane to fly. And we have a beautiful lake for a background, so it makes doing aerobatic work kind of fun because you can change the scenery by whichever way you head. In my years of flying, I've had 2 Baby Great Lakes. First one, the purpose was to learn to do aerobatics, single place airplanes, so I had to do it by either some books or a video. After I had thought I was pretty good at doing aerobatics, I invited a couple of my friends to come out to the Tracy Airbox to watch me go through my routine, and I entered a spin at 4,500 feet. But what I really didn't realize at the time that I hadn't fully stalled the plane, and when I held the stick back and kicked in the rudder, the airplane started to spin, but I didn't realize that I had gone inverted. And when I tried to recover, it wouldn't recover. And after a few turns around, I tried the Texas recovery, and that didn't work. And I had 2 of my buddies circling me watching it, and they thought for sure that I had bought the farm. So I decided to get the hell out of this thing. So I tried to get out of the airplane, and I struggled for enough time that I realized that I was not going to make it. So in desperation, I applied power, and the airplane recovered. That was not a good experience. So then I went and took some spin lessons. But anyway, I did learn to do aerobatics, and I try to do them every time I go for a flight. I'll try to get in a roll or 2 just to keep active with it. I like to do just mild aerobatics. And this is a nice area because we've got all these vineyards and orchards to go by, and the Mount Canocti is always a good target to practice your holding a nose on the point. I just like to go up and do air work. One of the little tricks I have is I put a whole bunch of assignments in a paper cup, and then I'll draw 1 or 2 for a flight. Tell me either go up and practice slow flight or lazy 8s or whatever. It's just a fun way to learn. One good thing about the area is we do have a choice of off-field landing to pick from. You just want to stay out of the vineyards because they're full of wires. They'll tear up an airplane good. My wife learned to fly when she was a grandmother, and she was flying a Varga Kachina, with the very first one they made. And at that time I was flying a red Baby Great Lakes. So we'd do air shows together. She'd fly the Varga and I'd take the Baby Great Lakes in. We did that for a few years up here in Lake County, and then she had back surgery and we discovered that flying me in the airplane was no longer something she could do, so we sold the Varga, and then I got into the market for a general aviation airplane, I mean a light sport airplane, so I ended up with the Corby. Okay, pretty much wraps it up. I hope you've enjoyed this little video on the Corby Starlet CJ1. Granted, it's a rather unique airplane. There's only 4 of them in this country, but it really has no bad habits. If anybody's interested in flying light sport, this is a good way to go. You don't have to spend $100,000 to get light sport. This airplane really has no bad habits. You need to fly a tailwheel airplane. It'd be a fun little machine for you. Hope you enjoyed this.